Are you ready for a reboot? Welcome to the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. History reminds us those hit hardest often become the change makers. This year, we've all hit crazy economic, social, and emotional rock bottoms. We all get knocked down. Something hits globally, locally, personally. It affects our health, finances, our relationships. We have to recreate a business or career. Each show, Sheila and her special guest will be sharing their reboot stories, guiding you with real solutions to upgrade and up-level emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. Here on NBC's KCAA Radio. If you're ready to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and bra straps, enjoy a listen. Here's Sheila.
Welcome to the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. Here we have real people sharing real stories and actionable steps to help you reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your business and personal life on your terms. I'm your host, Sheila Mac, and today we have special guest, Ben Winter. Ben certainly hasn't been idle in life. A couple years out of college, he has started doing things and going places he never would have expected, from traveling to personal growth to marriage and child to divorce and parenthood to entrepreneurialism and inspiring others. Ben has flown an airplane on his own and has been scuba diving in the Galapagos. He has seen the animals in Tanzania and has traveled all over Europe with a 6-month-old child in tow. He has performed improv for over a decade, acted in several plays, and even a movie. He's owned several businesses, and his biggest passion is exploring the mind. In all of his personal growth work, the one constant was that it all stems from the mind. So between personal growth and improv, he found this weird realm called expectations. And we are going to learn more about expectations in our discussion now. So welcome to the show, Ben.
Thanks for having me.
And I like to start off this show. The show came about based on my new best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. So I'd like to start off by asking you if you have a time in your business or personal life where you experienced a tough situation and how you got back on track.
Oh, plenty. The one that probably hits the most was probably during the divorce, where I kind of hit the bottom rung of whatever ladder you would consider life to be on. And it was a tough struggle to get through, but I had started doing a lot of meditation and let's call it spiritual work. So not religious, just spiritual. And actually found my way out through the help of some friends and meditations and all kinds of stuff. And really kind of came out with a new perspective on life and actually a new purpose. And that's kind of where I started down the realm of writing my own self-help books and stuff like expectations. So it was a necessary evil, if you will.
Yes. And sometimes I just finished another interview, and sometimes what happens is the universe conspires for our best and highest good. And that means tough situations show up as a redirection. Like little things happen and we don't listen. And then we get redirected. And all of a sudden beautiful things show up and we're on that better place in life. And it sounds like that's what happened. You got to travel the world and do all these fun things. I'd love to hear about that. That really sounded interesting. How did you travel with this little one? How did that work?
Yeah. So we knew we were having our child. And shortly after he was born, my then wife said, hey, you're not really happy at your job. You should quit and we should move to Europe. And I was like, no, we can't do that. We just had a baby, right? Every reason why not. And let's just say through a lot of things that happened over the next 6 months, we decided to go ahead and do that. So I quit my job. We put things in storage that we wanted to keep. We sold off just about everything else or donated it, and we hit the road. We left for Europe, and our son was 6 months old. Now, the beauty of very small children is they're not mobile. So they go where you go. So if you want to go travel Europe, the best time is between 0 and I'm going to say like 12 months, because usually around our son, around 9 months, was like, I'm going to walk everywhere myself. Because I've met babies that are 13 months and they're just still I'm just hanging out.
Yep.
And I'm like, yeah, man, my son was like active as quickly as he could be. But yeah, we went to Europe and it ended up being a really fun adventure, about 3 months vacation, if you will. And then we came back because we missed our friends and family. So
Yes. There's something beautiful about traveling. It's educational and healing and helpful in so many different ways. Now, I adopted I have 6 children, 3 of mine from birth and 3 that I adopted, and they're all grown now. But when they were little, they also traveled with me. And we, with the budget, I was running businesses, so I couldn't go far, but I did take about 3 months too. It was all summer. And we went all the way across the United States and learned about all the history of the US. And so we stayed with the Amish. We did all that. And
wow.
and we got to learn all these things. And then we ended up we went to Club Med Sandpiper, which is like a family Club Med vacation site. And I didn't know it was hurricane season. That's what I knew. So it was like 50% off. So it was really cool. And we stayed there for a month, and we would go to Disney World, and they had Epcot Center. And so although we did the rides, I was like, now we're in Epcot. So now we're going to learn about the rest of the world. And so we traveled when they were little. And then later, by the time my youngest were teens, I was traveling the world, and I traveled the world for 7 years straight, and learned with the Tony Robbins group and a whole bunch of other people, and went just about everywhere. And the kids were used to it because
That's great.
that. Yeah. So that was the thing that it changed what they were thinking and doing. Like, the world is bigger. You have opportunities and options that, you don't know that you have when you're just in one place. For sure. And now with everything locked down, and travel restrictions, all these crazy things going on, aren't you glad you did some travel time? Well,
Absolutely.
so there's something in not waiting for everything to be perfect to go do whatever it is you're called to do.
Agreed. Very much so. Don't wait. Just take action.
So now I'd love to hear about, so you went through a tough divorce, and that affects every part of our lives. When we go through something in one area of life, it affects our business, it affects our finances, it affects everything. And then you rebuilt, and you got into personal development, and you created a book and a program. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so when I was going kind of through that spiritual journey, I had this idea of teaching improv to the masses, if you will. So corporate groups, training, team building, any group that wanted better communication. Because I noticed that when I was doing improv, the people that I was on stage with, there was just a higher level of trust with them than any other group that I was around, because we all knew the rules of improv and we all practiced them. So they were all kind of top of mind for us. And since we all live a life of improv, because nobody wakes up with a script, then, the same rules apply. And I use them all the time, every day. And for me, it's mostly subconscious at this point, but it's something that people can learn and use. And so I wrote my first book called Living Unscripted, based off of that. And I said, all right, people are going to hire an author, so I'm going to become an author, right?
Oh, yes.
It's not going to be good enough that I have this program. I'm going to be an author too. And that was probably the easiest book I've ever written, because it just flowed right out, because I already knew the content, I knew the vision. It was easy. And then I started writing some other more specific versions of the same book, like Business Unscripted for business, and Relationships Unscripted for relationships. And then as I was continuing to teach this, I kept coming across this saying that I would tell everyone. I said, the only reason anybody gets upset is because an expectation hasn't been met.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's a cool saying. Seems to hold true every which way I look at it. Doesn't solve any problems though. and so I sat down and created a flow chart around, this moment in time of being upset, and kind of working through it from the view of expectations. And after I finished that flow chart, I was like, there's a lot of depth to a lot of these questions and answers. And now I need to write a book about it. So that's where my newest book came in. was just really filling in all the blanks of this flow chart to help solve the problem. Because I like to solve problems if I come up with them, because there's too many people saying there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem, but not doing anything about it.
Yes. So now how does that I know I think of I can't help but think of Tony Robbins, change your expectations for appreciation. So he has that saying. And so how does changing your expectations, how is that applied in your book, and what does that look like in somebody's life? What does that bring about?
So for me, I don't necessarily tell people to change their expectations, more understand them and where they come from and why we have them. And I always tell people, when you find yourself upset, recognize it as a wonderful gift, because it's a trigger point where you can choose something different.
Okay.
You can either choose to stay being upset and you're just going to miss out on all your dreams and happiness, or you can see it as for what it is, and that's an unmet expectation, in which case now you can explore that and really find out, did I even know that I had this expectation? Because sometimes we don't even know we have it until we're upset by somebody or something not meeting that expectation.
Yeah.
You know, you get into a marriage and then all of a sudden it's like, well, they're not doing what I thought they should do in this marriage.
Oh yeah.
Only I didn't know what I wanted from this marriage until it's now not going met, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it becomes this new program that you get to discover about how you think life and the universe should work. And so it's not about necessarily changing that expectation. It's understanding it, deciding if it's something that you actually truly want in your life. And then if it involves somebody else, is it time to share that expectation? And is that expectation reasonable? And also, what are their expectations? Because they may or may not match. And so to change your expectation, you have to first know what it is. So to some extent, yes, you can change your expectations, but you have to understand why you have what you have in the first place before you can do that.
This is so true. And I do some similar stuff with relationships. And there's these expectations, especially going into a marriage. That's a great point. And there's a whole bunch of question answers in my relationship portion of my book, because people have they may date one way and it may be wonderful. And it'd be like, wow, this is great. We could spend all our life together, just do these dating things. And then you get into you're like cohabiting, you're living in the same house, and then you raise a family. And what comes out is, well, this is what marriage looks like in my expectation. And there's these unwritten rules from the culture, from the family, from who knows where, and each person has these unwritten rules that nobody talks about. And they fight over these silly rules because they never talked or had these discussions about what does that expectation look like, and how can we blend these, and what are we willing to do to be in this relationship, and what's just like, this is not me, and I'm not going to be able to like give my whole like being up to be in this other way of being that's not me. And those discussions to have before are going to save so much money and time and family struggle. And think about right now, parents having their children move back home that are adults. I have 2 adult kids that are back home, and I love it, and we get along really well. But there's a lot of people struggling with that because there's a different relationship. They're not your children, they're your children, and you're helping them out because the dorm closed and they were in college, whatever, with this pandemic. And so now you're like, okay, but now you're in this home and you're not a child, so I can't treat you like a child, but there's expectations because you're living in my house and it could be a roommate that, oh my gosh, like I remember I had different roommates after, like I've owned my own homes, married, divorced, whatever, because it was an arranged marriage and we were so different. It was like night and day. I was like, I'm not giving up everything I want to do in life to just be controlled. No, but it did, and he didn't want to work. But anyway, long story, but not a bad person. It just totally different, so different, night and day. But we have these incredible kids, and that was what kept us together as long as we did, was for the kids, and that was that. But when you think about it, those expectations, we didn't have those discussions. It was an arranged situation. And so we didn't get to say, hey, what do you want? What do you expect? You know, what are your goals and vision? How do you want to raise a family? What do you want to do? Are you going to work, or, oh, if I make too much money, you don't want to work, or whatever. These are certain, you know, what level is what you want to earn or be, or what religion you want to practice at home. If you have kids, you might have a combined religion, or you might, okay, we're going to do it this way. But those discussions are make or break. And that's for business too. So there's expectations of a business. When I hire people for my business, I have certain expectations that I'm very clear about. And I think that helps screen a lot of people that it wouldn't fit. And I don't really, I have VAs now, but I had 5 gift stores and over 200 employees at one point in my younger life while raising all these kids. And so I had to be very clear about my expectations, and then what I offered my employees was, it was more like a family. And there were, you know, flex time and there was a lot going on that was very modern. And this was 1993, I think it was, that I started with the first store. And so a long time ago, and I had 2 nannies that did childcare for the ladies that wanted to sell in the store but had babies, and, you know, all kinds of flex time and things. And I was like, I can't pay you more than this, but I can offer you all these things that you would want. And that's why it was like a family. But I expect during the holiday big sale, I expect you to be on board. And so is that. So it is expectations. That's huge.
Yeah. And the other thing to keep in mind is, even if you have those discussions beforehand, the communication doesn't stop. There's always going to be something else. There's some nuance that changes, or a new situation that arises. So just because you had that conversation up front doesn't mean you stop having conversations about these things.
Exactly. It is. It comes up almost every day, almost every week, when you think about it. And just, I think when you're able to have those honest communications, and it sounds like your book helps with a lot of that, is, you know, pulling those expectations out and talking about them, maybe, or just realizing, oh, is that what it is? I mean, I know I didn't feel well for a while. I had a minor surgery things this last year, and I was mad at myself because I'm used to doing a lot. And even though everybody thought I was still doing a lot, to me, I wasn't meeting my own expectations. And I had that in my mind. I was like, oh, you know, and journaling, I was like, wait a minute. What can I just love myself through healing? What if if a friend, a relative was going through all this stuff, I would be so kind to them. Why am I being so mean to myself? Why can't I give myself a minute, you know? And it really helped me shift that talk in my head about, oh, you know, like, you could do so much more, and what, you didn't clean this whole section of the house because you worked 12 hours today and you don't feel good. Like, you know, that's still like, instead I changed it to, oh my gosh, you got so much done, you know, you should be proud of yourself for what you could do instead of what you didn't do, which is a big expectation on ourselves. How does that play out in your book with self expectations?
Well, this is the hard part for people to digest, is it's a practice. You have to practice. If you understand that most of how you think and feel and respond to the world is programmed into you, like 95% of it by the time you're 18.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 50% of it by the time you're 7, or something insane like that. If you remind yourself that it took you 18 years to be programmed, it's not going to take you 18 minutes to unprogram yourself. Or to change the programs. You now have to consciously create new habits and new thoughts. So loving yourself isn't just a one-time, I'm just going to choose to love myself, and now I'm done. You are going, when you decide you want to do something, well, guess what? You're going to get plenty of opportunities to practice. Yeah. And that's just how the universe works. I'm going to practice patience. Great. Here's an opportunity to practice. Oh, here's another one. Here you go. Yeah. It's like, oh, I was hoping I would get this and there'd be no more lessons.
Right.
But you have to practice it until it becomes such a habit that you don't even think that you're doing it.
It's a natural thing. So now could you share maybe some chapters in your book and some, like, maybe your favorite points or
Sure.
yeah.
Well, it's funny because in the back of the book I have an appendices of I just shifted that book away. I don't have one right next to me. Oops. But anyway, there's in the appendices I have lots of examples. So I talk about like religion and science and sex and employment and all those things. I provide examples of like how this can be used in those worlds. But you know, the piece, one of the pieces in there that I really like to explore is your subconscious is working for your benefit, and it only sees it that way. It doesn't see things as right or wrong. It's just, this is what I know and this is what I'm going to do, and it's the right thing, always the right thing.
Okay.
And so your subconscious is running you. So when you speak a language, you grew up learning to speak that language, therefore your program says this is the language I'm supposed to speak. So when you start to fight that and you're working on a new language, your body's like, well, no, I already do this language. Or you know, in a relationship, you know, I'm supposed to be the provider and you're the one providing, like this isn't right. And now I'm fighting it. And the main reason for this is that the programming that you have doesn't want to be wrong, because all it knows is that this is the answer. This is what I know and this is what I'm going to do. So our subconscious may fight us when we want something different, because now we're consciously choosing something different than our program. So if we grow up learning to not love ourselves and to put other people first, and we now want to love ourselves and put ourselves first, we have to battle that old program that's really good at what it does.
Yes. Protecting us.
It is. It's absolutely.
At that one time, it did protect us, and then it doesn't serve anymore at a certain point sometimes.
Exactly. And so now we have to fight this. But the good news is the conscious choice is very, very strong, but it's very, very short.
Yes.
So you have to practice that consciously over and over and over and over and over until that voice grows really loud and the other voice grows really soft. And that old program's never going to go away. It may get so silent you forget that it ever existed, but it's still there. And every now and then some situation will come up. It's like, hey, I'm still here. It's like, great, go sit down. You know, people will look at me nowadays and they're like, when I tell them that I had no self-confidence and I was like the shy kid in high school and college, they're like, you, what are you talking about? Well, I've practiced for many, 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 many years on ways to have self-confidence and be confident in myself and my actions. And, you know, yeah, every now and then it's that little voice says, Ben, are you sure? Are you sure you're good enough for this? Right. And I'm like, yeah, sit down. I got this.
Yes.
And that's the big misconception that a lot of people have when they start down the personal growth journey. It's like, I'm going to read this book and I'm going to be cured. Well, now, first of all, you're not curing anything. You're just changing a paradigm. And second, you're reading something that you're supposed to practice over and over and over and over and over. So whether you do Tony Robbins, whether you read books, whether you know, do this course or that course, who cares what you're doing as long as you're moving forward and practicing what is being taught. Like my flowchart, it's not a one-stop shop, but if you find yourself being upset and you follow the flowchart, and you find yourself being upset and follow the flowchart and over and over and over, eventually the amount of time that you're upset shrinks down to almost nothing, and it actually starts to reverse itself, because then you start to recognize expectations going unmet before it actually becomes a problem. So then you're able to talk to yourself or the people around you and say, hey, before I get upset, I forgot to tell you that I have this expectation of you. So that's my bad in not communicating up front. Now let's have this dialogue and talk, because I don't want to be upset and I don't want you to get upset, and so on and so forth.
Yes, that's so true. So it's really, to me, it sounds like kind of like a brain thought rewiring in a way, because the more you practice, then that becomes the conscious and the subconscious. It's an automatic thing, but it's something that, you know, we can rewire our brains, and it takes so much effort to. I know I lost a child. One passed away. He was 22, and it was December 2019. It was really hard. He had a heart condition. And when you go through something like that, especially as a mom, your brain, it doesn't matter if it's a car accident, a loss of a loved one, whatever tragedy, your brain will keep going. Like you'll replay the whole sad part or the difficult part. And I was aware, oh man, I don't want to live there. And I don't think my son would want me to live there. And I don't want my other kids to be stuck there either. And we would talk about, okay, now go to the better happy thought. Now, how can we kind of flip that thought? So, and it was so much work, like just to get up out of bed. And then, you know, and you give yourself credit, and then you do a little bit more, and having gratitude. And so it was a lot of work, that awareness of our brain and how we can go get stuck. I don't know if you've ever met someone who's stuck on something that happened 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And they literally, there's different between it happened and I'm going to use it for good, and it's a reality. And yes, you honor your emotions through something, but there's also, it happened and 20 years ago, but I'm still there. And that's the difference, where you never got to put that down and live your life. You're stuck in whatever that was.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with being upset. You can choose to stay upset.
Yeah.
And that can last for years, or you can do something about it.
Right.
So that's the beauty of it, is you can recognize those moments in time. I'm upset. I'm pissed off. But wait, I have a choice here.
Yes.
And that's huge. I mean, if you take nothing else out of it, just knowing that, your life can change drastically.
Yeah. And I think, like Wayne Dyer, stimulus and response, there's the choice in between those two. And that's kind of like the flow chart you have, like this whole, like, awareness. Oh yeah, I do get mad often. Or, oh yeah, I am upset all the time at this person or this situation. And to be able to change that. And so your book is like a guide to being in control of that, with using your program and your map to retrain and get to that point where you don't have to live there anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the way that I've approached it is, you know, Einstein said you can't solve a problem at the same level it was created. So the interpretation that I've taken from that is that you can't solve an emotional problem emotionally. And that's why people turn to exercise. That's why they turn to religion or spirituality, meditation. That's why they sometimes turn to, like, turning it into a mental problem.
Yeah.
Where you solve it mentally. And that's kind of what I've done with a flowchart. A flowchart is a very mental process for an emotional issue. And so if you can take yourself out of the emotion just long enough to do something else, you can change that response. So yeah, Wayne Dyer, I'm sure, I haven't read that book, but I'm sure it's very much similar in the same process. And you got to take that moment in time and respond versus react, I'm sure, is a big piece of that.
Yes. And I think that awareness is really important. When did you find, as you were creating this book and program, when did your awareness come in to bring you to the program? What was the situation and the, like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, I can change this with my expectations? What was that moment for you, or that where you were like, wait, who's in control here? I am. Wait a minute.
So a lot of that came from, so I started doing a lot of personal growth work in my early 20s. And so that's personal growth work equals awareness training.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
That's
the more you're aware of yourself and how you think and feel and act, the more you're able to do something about it. The drawback is you're fully aware that you're responsible for your own actions. And sometimes that really sucks.
Yeah.
But it's very freeing at the same time. So I got a lot of that through personal growth. And then I started doing a lot of improv and found that improv itself was personal growth and very freeing for me. That's kind of where I found the majority of my self-confidence. And then when I was going through kind of like the divorce and the dark period in my life and started down the spiritual path, it sort of all just kind of came together. And that's when I was like, all right, I need to do something with this.
Yeah. And
again, through teaching improv, that's when I really kind of discovered, hey, there's this giant big world for expectations. Because I was constantly having expectations of other people and really started recognizing, like, I have these expectations of other people. Also at the time I was doing a lot of networking and meeting people for business and all this other stuff, and a lot of people are not on time.
Oh,
And I have an expectation, because of how I grew up,
yeah.
to be early.
Mm-hmm.
Not on time or not late, but to be early to everything.
Oh, so then they're really late even if they're on time.
I was able to accept them being right on time, but
Okay.
like 5 minutes late, I was like, all right, fine. 10 minutes late, it was like kind of messing with me. 15 minutes late, I'm like, we have cell phones, people. Like,
Yes,
15 minutes late should not be a thing
right.
without some sort of like, hey, I'm running late. And so I started to really check in with myself. I'm like, are my expectations reasonable? Hey, have I even shared my expectation about being on time with this person?
Right.
If I'm setting that meeting saying, hey, I grew up where I'm always early, so I will be there early. If you want to come early, great. If you want to come on time, that's great. If you're going to run late, let me know. That's me setting an expectation with the other person. Now, if they say, yeah, no, I'm always 15 minutes late, I'll be like, okay, that's going to take away from our meeting time, because, I end right on time too. But as long as I know that, I can adjust my expectations around it.
Yes.
And inevitably they show up early comparatively. I say
Right.
comparatively, to their normal 15 minutes. But again, we were doing this magical thing. It's lost in time, but it's called communication.
Right.
It's an amazing tool. I highly recommend everybody use it.
So now, if you're listening in and you have a family member, a friend, someone that's late a lot, they may just have a little bit of ADHD.
Might be.
Or something like that. And the secret, because I've had this big family of 6. I adopted three of my own. And so we've had all kinds of different things. And some of us are a little bit more ADD than others, and some of us are more timely than others, and we all are different. And one of the things that helped the most was for those that struggle with time, because you can get lost in time, especially if you have ADD. I mean, like, you can, and that's just a thing. But everything would be like, I would let the time be ahead of the time. So, because we knew that if we said 3:00 or 2:00 and we said it, it would be like, is that now? it's a whole wire. And let me tell you, that switched everything. So it was like we all knew that we would change the time. It was an agreement, but then everybody was kind of on time more, because before that there was an upset and an anger from those that were wired to be on time or like to be on time, and those that just like struggled. So like they wanted to be there, but they struggled. Like it was literally a struggle. And just that little game, that shift was like, so I guess maybe we changed the expectation a little bit in a way, because we changed the way we did things so that everybody got to meet an expectation based on the way they operate, let's just say. So it's really kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I can go back to, oh my gosh, my grandmother moved in with us and had adults that dementia. And at a certain point, the dementia gets worse. And she lived with us for a few years, and it got to the point where at a certain point it gets bad, and the doctor had her on no chocolates and no sugar. and so she's like in her early hundreds now. She lived to be 103. So maybe she was 101 or something. She would run away from home.
Oh, geez.
And, because they do this, she would wander in the middle, like 4 a.m. or some crazy hour, and we wouldn't even know. And she'd be gone to the store. She would walk to different stores, and she would steal the chocolates and eat them because
sorry, that's kind of funny, but not funny.
and then we'd find her, and so for about a week, when my children first started their Montessori school, my daughter was like pre-K, we arrived late. And they were very strict on time. But I thought, Montessori, they're not strict on time. It doesn't matter. And so I just drop her off and keep going, not realizing they were, this is pre-K. We're playing. And, it's not school. In my mind, it's like daycare, right? And so then the principal gets us in the office. It was a husband and wife team that ran the school. And they were both there. And they said, we told your daughter that she's been late 3 times this week. And she put her little hands on her hips and said, "Do I look like I drive? I wanted to be here on time." So until I get a license, you're talking to the wrong person.
It's a true story.
And she has always been on time. And she has always, like, this is, bless her brain, she works things out. She's got it. I mean, that's just the way she's always been. And it was beautiful. And then they talked to us, and we actually got to place Grandma really close to that school in our house, in a beautiful home that she had dinner at home, and then she'd go to her home so that she didn't escape and get hurt or whatever out there stealing chocolates. So it's that little difference. And even think about that school, expecting, they were talking to the wrong person.
Yeah.
And my daughter was like, "Hey, you know what? I'm just not taking this right now." And the first thing she did when she was old enough to drive was, she was like, "I got my license. I saved up. I bought my own car. I'm going to be everywhere on time." It was stuck in her brain from that experience. So that's something that, isn't that crazy how that happens? And that goes to the expectations of what's in our brain that we don't even know is there from some silly thing that happened a million years ago when you were in kindergarten or pre-K, nursery school, whatever. And so that's that awareness that comes over time.
Yeah, and that's how it starts, is that if your parents are always late to everything, you start to learn there's really no consequence to it. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of grew up with this program of being late is okay. Yeah, and that's the norm, because that's the family you grow up in.
Right.
Or you come up with the exact opposite of, like, I always felt like the bad person walking in late, or I was always made fun of for walking in late. So regardless that my parents are late, when I'm old enough, I will never be late. It's the same thing where people will either take the programming on or try and do something like the opposite.
Right.
You know, all those stories of kids that grew up in poverty, and they grew up and they're like, I'm going to be a millionaire because I don't want to ever live like that again. I don't want my children to live like that again, etc. They made a huge choice that was different from the programming that was being kind of, I'm going to say, forced upon them.
Right.
But you know, parents aren't out there to, like, force programming on them. It's that they're doing the best job that they can.
Yes.
And whether it resonates with that child or not is to be seen, because, you know, I have a 12-year-old son. I have no idea if I've messed him up for life or not. You know, time will tell, and hopefully he takes the good stuff and doesn't become a jerk or something. I don't know. We'll find out. So,
you know, and that's something that, I mean, raising my 6 kids, and my youngest that passed away, he did have a heart condition since 5th grade. So it was something we always worried about, but they're all good, incredible kids. And they came from different places, 3 of them that were adopted in when they were very young, like 2. So they were all, you know, part of the family. And so you think of this very diverse, different group of people somehow figuring out how to, like, coexist together. and every single child has a different story now that they're adults of what life was like as a kid in our home.
Yeah.
And what we did wrong and what we did right is different depending on the child, and how we messed them up or didn't, or how it helped them or didn't. And it's so you could have 6 people with different stories that went through the same household and had the same, and every person, like, we're all, what is personal development? We're all still, like, trying to fix ourselves or improve or better ourselves. If you're not growing, you're dying, right? So we're always doing our best at the moment. And then we find, oh man, we need to do something better. And so that's, I mean, my first child I had nothing. I went through abuse. I was foster care, homeless as a kid, all these things. So I wanted to give my kids everything in the world. And I did, you know, best education, best opportunities, travel the world with me, everything. But there's overgiving. So if you, believe it or not, if you give too much to your children, they will resent you and they won't learn and grow. And so there's a balance of doing too much or doing too little, or, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. And, you know, there's no perfect answer.
There really isn't, because each one is different and they have different needs. I had, out of those kids, imagine 3 of them did great in a certain type of school. The others, so some were more ADD, whatever. They needed Montessori, they needed Waldorf schooling, they needed to be free. And the others, oh, my daughter was so happy. She's the only girl, all boys. And she was so happy when she got to go to Catholic school. We're not Catholic, but she got to go there, and they're very like strict, and everything is very regimented. And she was in seventh heaven. It was like, thank goodness that Montessori stuff was all over the place. I just want to have, straight A student, and then lots of, and she was into sports. But that's the difference. It was that was her place. That was the best for her. Now, if I put the other, like one of my others in there that couldn't sit in that chair for 5 minutes, he was a failure in that school.
Right.
But in the Montessori school, he was a straight A student because he was learning, and had a photographic memory and could just learn everything. Just he needed to learn differently. So that's accommodating, and that's for grown-ups too. It's not like we graduate school and all of a sudden we're a desk person or we have to be a speaker. Whatever we're doing, we have to be aware of those tendencies, and that's our own. I guess that gets back to the self expectation.
Yeah, there's so many inputs in our life when we're kids. There's TV, there's friends, there's people at school. Sometimes we'll hear the same thing out of one person's mouth and interpret it differently.
Yes.
So everybody having a different view of how it all happened.
It's funny.
It has nothing to do with what actually happened. It has to do with all the inputs that change our perspective, changes our pair of glasses that we wear.
Yes.
And, there's still some basic, are you a good person because I was in a family with good people?
Right.
Most of the time, the very foundational pieces move along and support everyone, which is why you have some people who grew up with hate in their heart because they grew up in a house where there was nothing but hate.
Yes.
And, they may not understand why they hate. They just know that that's what they're supposed to do.
Wow.
Because that's what they grew up with. Same thing with people who love and care and are giving. They grew up in a household where that's what was the norm. That's how life works. Yeah. And then you get out there and people take advantage of it. And you're like, I don't understand why you're taking advantage of it. Like, this is not how that works.
I was so disappointed, when I remember my grandparents told me, you know what, people aren't all nice. You got to do all these things. And I was like, why not? I'm so sad that this is sometimes the case. Or, you have to have a certain relationship with employees, and you have to have a certain relationship with, you can't be your kid's best friend and the parent at the same time. There's all these different levels of I don't know, relationship you have to have. I was a landlady for many years with lots of properties, and I had to have an arm's length. And I was like, you mean when I first started managing property, I just wanted to be everybody's friend.
Right.
And then my grandparents were like, honey, no, because you got to collect the check from them. And unfortunately, you can't be their best friend. And I'm like, why not? At 18, 19, when I started doing rental property management, that's what I thought. And so there is different levels of that where you can still be a loving person. And that's what I had to learn and figure out, like, how do you be a loving person, but have a good boundary?
Yeah.
And I think with that nice person thing, it's that boundary.
And boundaries are expectations. So they're kind of interchangeable. It's like, this is my line, and this is what I expect from you to stay on that side of that line. And if you cross over, this is what you can expect to have happen.
Yes.
And that's what a boundary is. And then we usually beat ourselves up because we moved that line back because somebody crossed it. Right. And so now we're upset with ourselves instead of them.
Yes. So like as a landlady, when I was a manager of many apartment buildings and such, when I was younger, and I was running the store and doing all that. But I had, the line is the lease, whether it was commercial or residential, it's a lease. This is a lease agreement. This is the line. And if I don't follow it and let somebody break the rules and don't pay the rent, don't do this and all this stuff, and they don't follow the line, then, or they don't do the maintenance they're supposed to do, whatever, or I don't do my part of maintaining the place, then the line is broken and the lease is broken and there's a legal problem. and,
Exactly.
and that's kind of, but in relationship, you don't get a lease. Like you get a marriage license, sure, but like you need to write that stuff out. Like we need to talk about this beforehand, because that clarification can really say, oh, okay, you know what? No deal. No. Or you know what? Yeah, we need to renegotiate. We need to have an amendment on this thought, because in this contract, in this marriage, we need to amend that idea, because that's not going to work for us. And I think that's kind of a cool thing to do. I mean, it's so important to do if you can, if you're having trouble, if you can have, read your book, talk to somebody, a relationship coach or somebody to help you to decide if you can come to new terms.
Absolutely.
Or, not.
You mentioned a lot of items like contracts and stuff. I mean, lawyers, as much as we all like to hate lawyers, they are really good at setting expectations. They're like, if this happens, this happens. If this happens, this happens. Are you in agreement? Yes, sign here. If you're not, let's talk, let's negotiate, let's change the contract so we're all in agreement. Buying a house, that's a contract. You know exactly what's going to happen when you buy that house, if you choose to read it all.
Right.
Most of the time it's explained to you in kindergarten terms, but contracts are expectations. Laws are expectations. We expect you to follow the speed limit. If you don't follow the speed limit, you're going to get a ticket. Right. Nobody should ever be upset about getting a ticket if they know that they broke the law.
Yes.
What they're upset about is that they got caught. Like, oh, well, I was speeding because I wanted to be on time. And now I'm going to be late because you pulled me over. And it's like, well,
now you're really late.
Now you're really late.
Now you have an excuse. You got yourself a ticket to show them off. So you're good.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So that's, it's all wonderful stuff if you choose to look at it that way. A lot of people have a negative connotation to expectations. And the main reason for that is that the expectations that are met on a daily basis, we don't think twice about them. It's only when we have an unmet expectation do we really recognize, oh, there was an expectation there. So because we're more aware when we're upset, we just have this negative connotation that expectations are a bad thing, but they're just a thing. They're not positive or negative. There's plenty of expectations that we have on a day-to-day basis that work in our favor. Like wake up in the morning, I expect the electricity to be on, the refrigerator to have the food cold. I expect to be able to walk from one room to the other. As we get older, we're like, why is my knee hurt this morning? Like, what? I wasn't expecting my knee to hurt this morning, right?
Yeah.
But on a day-to-day basis, if you're healthy and you walk from one room to the next, you don't think twice about the expectation of, I'm a healthy person. It's only when we have an injury that we start getting upset about it. We're like, oh, I'm not able to do what I wanted to do. I'm not able to get done as much as I wanted to get done. I'm not able to exercise because of this foot injury or whatever it might be. So that's why we think of expectations as negative when expectations are just a thing.
And I think it's raising kids and just even at work, different things that go on our planet. I raise my kids with expectations, but also with discernment. And the discernment is, it doesn't matter who it is, a religious person, a teacher, somebody speaking, run it through your values. It's okay to question something that's not right, that is like, whoa, this is off. This is way off. And I tell you, my kids, they question me the most. And I was like, oh, why am I teaching you this? But it was good, because now when they have, going through the college years, let's just say, and you get the peer pressure and the group and the expectations of that type of, okay, we expect you to go party and do all these, and you can run it through your own discernment and say, you know what? No, that's not for me. We'll go play sports together and we'll go do these things together, but that I'm going to just not go do that. And that really gave them permission. And I think it's that the permission that you don't really need the permission, but it gave them that sort of, you start to learn, oh, you got to do what the peers do. You got to do what the teacher says. It's like, no, put it through your own value system, so that way you're safe and hey, this may not be aligned, and that's okay. That doesn't mean negative or positive toward that group. It just means for you. And that's super important.
I like that a lot, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
It brought up another thought or something else that I was taught, and it's always like, consider the source.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to take relationship advice from an 18-year-old.
Right.
You want to take relationship advice from somebody who's been married for 50 years. They kind of know how to make it work.
Right.
But again, with discernment, you can say, well, I like what you say about your relationship and how it works, yet I'm not sure that we're going to have that type of relationship. So I'm going to take some parts of what you say
Right.
and, discard others.
Right.
You're not going to take financial advice from somebody who doesn't have a portfolio.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You want to take financial advice from like Warren Buffett,
Yes.
somebody who's
Yes.
really got finance figured out.
Exactly.
It's that type of thing that we don't often do in society these days, is we don't necessarily consider the source.
Yeah.
When we're taking new information in. It's like, who is giving me this information? What's their motivation? What's their values? Are they in alignment with who they're reporting on or providing results for, or are they independent, or whatever it might be?
Yeah.
But we have to consider the source.
Yeah, it's so important. It's so important. So now we are coming to the end of our talking time. So I'd love for you to share where people can connect with you more, and also where they can get your books and programs.
Easy enough. I would recommend everybody go to havingexpectations.com, and you can get the flowchart we've been talking about for free. There's links to my books, to social media, all that fun stuff. So havingexpectations.com.
All right. All right. Thank you, Ben, again, for being a special guest on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been great.
All right. And for those tuning in, we'll be back after these messages. Stay tuned. If you are just tuning in, this is NBC's Sheila Mac Show here on KCAA Radio, the station that leaves no listener behind. I'm your host, Sheila Mac, and today I have a couple of announcements. First, I would like to hear from you. That's right. I would love to hear from you. To be honest, I want to know what your breakthrough is, what your reboot is. How are you reinventing and rebooting your life? What shows would you like to hear more of? What information do you need to help you get back on track this year? And to do that, the best way to connect with me is actually through my new YouTube channel, and that is Sheila Mac Show on YouTube. And there you can see past recordings, and you can also see other information and shares that I have. And I would love for you to share in the comments there what you're needing more of and what you're rebooting this year, and how we can help you get back on track.
Are you ready to make more money in your business by telling your heartfelt, vulnerable story? Hi, I'm Leanne Clune from Radiant Books, and join me on the Sheila Mac Show, where I'm going to talk about making more income, impact, and creating a legacy by sharing your story in a highly leveraged collaboration book, sparking unlimited possibilities for you and your business. Leanne Clune, Radiant Books. See you then. All right, I have some business leader reboot tips for you. If you are a small business owner, then there are a few things that can help you. First, think about business credit versus personal credit. If you have not tapped into business credit, this is very important. I actually have some free resources on my website to tell you more about how to do that. But business credit will get you, oh my gosh, more than 10 times, probably closer to 100 times more credit opportunities than if you just use your personal credit. And it will also save you in the event that you need to tap into personal credit or a home loan at that time when you need it most for your family or for whatever surprise we have next in this pandemic. So that is one tip that will help you and your business to get ahead this year.
You need a guide to show you how we get through a situation like this, to give you resources and to help you get out of the emotional pea soup fog of dealing with a crisis and the resulting fallout. I've been there, and I'm here to help you.